It has been over 20 years since I first played Lunar SSS Story Complete. I was only in my teens at that point in my life, yet somehow it feels like it was only yesterday. The characters, the music, the theme song, it all seemed so familiar, which is saying a lot because I don't remember what I had for breakfast, and just knowing that Suikoden 2 is going to get a remaster makes me so, what am I reviewing again? Point is, there's something special about Lunar SSS Story that stayed with me for a large part of my life, and I can't quite pinpoint what that is. This game was developed by Game Arts. Yeah, the same studio that brought us the Grandia series. Silver Star Story Complete is actually a remake of the Silver Star, which was released on the Sega CD back in 1992. If there was two words that I could use to sum up this game's experience, it would be charming and timeless. It is the textbook example of timeless, and I highly recommend it to anyone into these retro-style JRPG experiences. Before we get into it, if you like this review, it would help me out so much to hit that like button and sub for more JRPG content coming soon. You can also hit that super thanks if you'd like to support the channel. What did you think of Lunar SSS Story Complete? Do you agree with what I said? Let me know in the comments below. Alright, let's get into it. From a graphical perspective, Silver Star Story looks a generation behind. The character art is solid, but we have some very basic sprites and environment design. I mean, just look at the sprites. The world of Lunar, not to be confused with the main female character Luna, must be freezing as its inhabitants always feel the need to run on the spot, even inside volcanoes. But something truly commendable is how many anime-style sequences there are. I mean, the goal of the developers was to create a game with a focus on animation and storytelling, and that is just what they did. Just watching them really highlights how amazing a HD remaster would be. The anime sequences that you've seen in this review so far have been upscaled with AI, but the original ones? Yeah, these are the original ones, and they don't look great. These sequences also have full voice acting, and the quality here ranges from mid-tier to absolutely horrendous.
I'm sorry. I cannot go to the magic school today. I'm not feeling well.
Yeah, it's mostly absolutely horrendous. Some may even say charmingly horrendous. But at least the theme song and vocal tracks are amazing. There are many different arrangements throughout the game, and again, this is something that sounded just so familiar.
Wishing on a dream that seems far off, hoping it will come today. Into the starlit night, foolish dreamers turn their gaze, waiting on a shooting star.
The story focuses around Alex, a young boy from a small village who hopes to one day be like his hero, the legendary Dragon Master Dain. After traveling to a nearby cave with his childhood friends Luna and Rammus and his flying cat Null, the group comes across the dragon Quark, who beckons Alex to travel the world to become the new Dragon Master. To be completely honest, the story itself isn't particularly strong. There are a few twists and turns, and it certainly is enjoyable, but just don't expect anything new. But while the story may not be the strongest point, the journey that Alex and his friends go through is, and this is part of what makes the game so charming. There is an outstanding cast of characters. Meeting them, watching them grow, and listening to the constant banter between them makes this game such an enjoyable experience. Some of the lines of dialogue are just priceless. Each character has their own relationship with one another. There is plenty of love, a little bit of distrust, and an absolute smorgasbord of playful teasing. Let's take Null for instance, who constantly burns Rammus. Yeah, there is a lot of fat shaming here, which is something you wouldn't see in a modern game, but I can't deny that I laughed out loud more than once. Also worth noting is that if you're easily offended by Western translations not being one-to-one with its Japanese counterparts, then this game may hurt your feelings. Working Designs, who localized the game, made quite a few changes to the dialogue, including Western pop culture references. But if you ask me, it's this dialogue that gave the game so much charm and invested me in every single conversation. The turn-based combat is very simple. You'll take up to 5 characters into battle, which is defined by the story. At the start of each turn, you can choose from a basic attack, an ability, using an item, or defending. Your character's abilities consume MP, and its management when working through dungeons will be your number one consideration. You see, Lunar is not one of those friendly games that heal you or even warn you prior to a boss fight, but fortunately you can save at any time, which is nice. The difficulty curve is completely in reverse to what it should be. The start of the game requires a lot of grinding, with the mid to end game easing up a little, especially when it comes to the boss fights. The first boss fight is just brutal, and initially it will seem impossibly hard. Have you ever been annihilated by a boss thinking everything is fine because you're meant to lose for story purposes? Well, same thing here, except you're not meant to lose. I mean, it's the early game, you're still learning the ropes, and this jerk not only deals a load of damage but also heals himself for 100 HP per turn. He is the only boss to do this. Meanwhile, Rammus only attacks for about 20, so it's all up to buffing and using special moves with Alex. On that note, that's pretty much the strategy for every single boss fight. Buff, repeat the same offensive move, and continually heal with Jessica or Luna. Winning this first boss fight only becomes possible once you reach a certain level to learn a certain move, otherwise you are screwed. You see, there is a serious lack of customization. For the entire game, the only abilities you learn are through leveling up, with each character only learning a total of 4 or 8, some of which are completely useless. Then there's the fact that 99% of the time, you'll only equip the equipment that provides the biggest stat increases. The exception is the 2 accessory slots, which is really the only thing that might differentiate your party to mine. Deep character customization was clearly not a priority for this one. Silver Star Story features mostly linear progression, with the ability to fast travel eventually opening up. While the game doesn't feature any real side quests, it's still worth going back to previous locations and talking to the locals. I was really impressed with how often the NPCs change their dialogue based on what's happening in the story. This makes it worthwhile to talk to everyone. That and the fact that dialogue with them is usually very entertaining. Next, we have the dungeons, which are all really simple. Each has a clear start point and end point, with frequent side paths that lead to chests, usually providing the strongest equipment at that point in time. I was initially very relieved to find that there was no random encounters, with all enemies being located on the dungeon maps. But that does not mean you can simply avoid fights whenever you want. You see, enemies will chase you hard, especially flying enemies, which are very difficult to avoid. This and the lack of open areas mean that you'll need to fight through most of them to get to your destination. Yes, a lot of this time will be spent on these mob battles, but luckily there are AI options and predefined tactics, and this helps getting through these fights a little bit faster. I would suggest running, but most of the time this attempt will fail, even if you're 30 levels higher than the enemy. The large majority of the game will be spent in dungeons fighting enemies. Like I said before, the game is very grindy, and it can be quite challenging since you really need to manage your MP, as you don't know when the next boss is going to show up. Getting through the dungeons is really easy when you can spam your abilities, but you will need to manage your MP, so it is the hardest part of the game. Silver Star Story is clearly a product of its age, and a great example of this is with the item management and interface design. Each party member can only hold 6 items each, with Null being able to hold much more. I felt that too much time was spent manually transferring items and equipment between Null and the rest of the party, which is something that would have been inexcusable from a modern game. For the past 10 years, I have really wanted to replay Lunar Silver Story complete. I had a great time with it all those years ago and wanted to experience it again as an adult. As expected, the experience was a good one, and it really confirmed why Lunar Silver Star Story is held so highly among longtime JRPG fans. Silver Star Story is all about the journey. It is charming from start to finish, and this is truly driven by the main cast. They are awesome, and watching them grow and interact with one another is something that few games have done as effectively. It was also incredible how many anime cutscenes there are. This really helps deliver some of the key moments that simple sprite work simply could not do. And a special mention has to go to the main theme and all of its arrangements. This is one of the few tracks that has stuck with me for so long. But Silver Star Story isn't without its flaws. It is clearly a product of its time, and this is particularly evident with the item management. You can also expect a lot of grinding. While there may be no random encounters, there is still a lot of forced encounters, and you'll need to fight most of them if you're going to stand a chance against the bosses. The game's other big downfall is a lack of character customization. Outside of 2 accessory slots, there really is nothing that will set your party aside from mine, and this greatly limits your options in battle. Lunar Silver Star Story Complete is a highly regarded classic JRPG, and it's easy to see why. If you're into older gaming experiences like this one, then the first Lunar title is easy to recommend. What did you think of the game? Do you agree with what I said? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked this video, then you may want to check out my top 10 JRPGs from every year video. Also, it would help me out a lot if you hit like and subbed for more JRPG content coming soon.